Islanders up 1-0.
1-0.
They're up.
Islanders are.
This is not going to be good tonight. They're too fast.
We're good, Trace.
All right.
Okay.
No, I have. Okay. You need that. Yeah, I just want you to.
Hey,
A lot of people. Probably, but I'm on the board. I just need to know.
Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This regular meeting of the Township Council being held in accordance with the scheduled meetings of the Township Council established and adopted by the Township Council, which schedule designated the time, date, and place of this meeting. Adequate public notice of this meeting has been provided pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. We are using an electronic amplifying and recording device. And in order to obtain an audible and clear record, we request that all those wishing to speak be recognized and state your name and address directly to the microphone. The recording device is to be solely utilized by the Township Clerk's Office for the preparation of the minutes and shall be the official record of the Township Council meeting. Roll call.
Mr. Hutchison,
Present.
Mr. Owens,
Present.
Mrs. Stubbs,
She's on vacation.
Mrs. Winters.
Here.
Mr. Mignon,
Here.
Mrs. Strato,
Here.
Mr. Mercado,
He's on vacation.
Mr. Parliament,
Here.
Mr. Curtis,
Here.
Mr. Lechner,
Here.
Chief Harkins,
Here.
Mr. Chavo.
Here.
We have a proclamation, Overdose Awareness Day. Go ahead, ma'am.
Whereas addiction is a disease and the discrimination associated with addiction must be addressed so that no one feels shame or disgrace because of a drug overdose. And whereas prescription and illegal drug overdoses are now the #1 cause of accidental death in the nation, surpassing car accidents. And whereas according to the United Nations Office on Drug Crime World Drug Report 2019, North America continues to experience the high drug-related mortality rate in the world, accounting for 1 in 4 drug-related deaths globally. And whereas according to the Center for Disease Control, the estimated number of people in the United States who have died from an overdose in the 12-month period prior to January 2017 was 64,070. And whereas by acknowledging the grief felt by families and friends remembering those who have died or had a permanent injury as a result of a drug overdose, we help the general public understand its effects on New Jersey's communities. And whereas practitioners, persons at high risk, family members, and others can save lives by learning about the signs of an overdose and how to administer naloxone, and then call 911. And whereas International Overdose Awareness Day is a global event held on the 31st of August each year and aims to raise awareness of overdose, reduce the stigma of a drug-related death, and be recognized in communities around the world as a day to remember individuals for all walks of life who were lost to drug overdose and to support their families and loved ones. Now therefore be it resolved that David Mayer, Mayor of the Township of Gloucester, and Orlando Mercado, Council President, do hereby proclaim August 31st, 2020 as Overdose Awareness Day. Call upon our residents to learn about this disease and to aid and support those who are affected by it.
Thank you. Chief Harkins has a list of Class 1 special officers.
Chief Harkins is requesting a resolution to appoint the following individuals as Class 1 Special Law Enforcement Officers: Robert McKnight, Kevin Butcherini Jr., Jonathan Markowitz, Christian Avalis, Dwayne Gillespie, Kushan Pearson, and Kevin Ober.
Thank you. We'll have our first public portion. This is for agenda items only. Anyone addressing council may speak one at a time. All those wishing to address council have had their turns. They may address council a second time, only if it adds to what was said earlier. Mr. Heinball?
Good evening, Pete Heinball, Morningstar Court. I did send a couple questions related to the bill list to Mr. Cardis, and he responded, but it must have been after I was en route to this meeting, so may I ask? One was I was asking about why we were paying Parker McKay under the COVID and charging it to a COVID.
Because as you're aware, council has previously passed resolution 20:04-089, which authorized the administration to issue TANs, tax anticipation notes. And we did in fact issue a tax anticipation note. We closed on it on July 15th, and that was in the amount of $10 million. We did that based on concerns with tax situation, concerns generally with this COVID situation, concerns over the state aid, and quite frankly, we were concerned that we would not have enough cash to be able to pay the schools and our bills.
Oh, that doesn't need to be shown on a resolution?
No, it does not.
Right.
If you read
Wow.
read that resolution, it'll tell you that we have the authority to go ahead and do that. Is that correct, Mr. Carlin? That's correct.
Okay, that's pretty big news.
And that will mature that was at the rate of 0.72 of 1%. It was awarded competitively to Amboy Bank, and that will mature on March 1st of 2021.
I'm sorry, March 1st of 2021?
Correct.
So we're paying $10 million back?
That's correct.
Is that going to be difficult? This is not agenda items now, I'm sorry, but it
It's
was brought up.
It's not a budget item. You don't budget for it. It comes right out of the tax money. The way I envision it, that'll still be there. That 10 million will still be there at that point. We'll just make that payment directly from our cash proceeds. Correct, Christie?
Okay, I'll come back to some questions on that for the second portion. It's not an agenda item, but it does raise some questions. Staying with the bill list, we also charged items to an account called the Grants Revolving Loan Fund.
Correct. That is the revolving loan fund for CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. And what we do is we make loans to qualified low-income individuals for necessary repairs for their home. Not cosmetic, but, dangerous situations, heaters, things of that nature. When the loans are paid back off, the money goes back into that account, and then we issue more loans from that account. So that process is constantly, it's repetitive.
Okay. Is this the first time I've never noticed us utilizing this revolving fund? So you've been using that?
Christie, go ahead.
Okay. And I did have a third bill list question that I didn't send to you via email, but it came up. We paid $193,000 to Hunter Truck Sales. It's like a capital purchase for public works equipment. But it also looked like that money was borrowed last year. Is
That probably would be a fair assessment.
we seem to over borrow a lot,
I
or
disagree
early
with
borrow,
you.
whatever phrase you want.
Again, Pete,
Yeah, I know.
I disagree with you. It takes a year to get a truck like that in. You don't just go get it off the lot.
I'm not worried about how long it takes to get. When you cut the check is when you should borrow the money.
Right.
That's how anyone.
You don't believe we should buy new trucks, I understand.
No, I'll say it again. I believe Gloucester Township should buy new trucks there.
But we have to borrow
You
money.
shouldn't borrow money until the cash is ready to go out the door. Anyone would do. That's how anyone would manage finance.
Thank you.
Manage finance.
Thank you.
And that's, we do that all the time. We have this $30,000 sitting in what you call the old pile or something. Buy this because you over borrowed last year. That's all then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Agenda items only. Paul?
Good evening, Council. Paul Krug, Blackwood. Just was hoping to hear a little bit on ordinance 2010. Just kind of a 2-sentence bit there. Just was wondering, is that closed down to help our businesses and open a street up for the restaurants too?
That was a request given in by PSE&G. It's right off the Black Horse Pike at the dead end street of Maple Avenue. PSE&G was located on one side. There was some backyards fronting on that street. PSE&G has purchased all the frontages on both sides of the street. They're doing some expansion of their facility there. And there's really no need for that section of the street at dead end. PSE&G owns both sides of that street.
It's actually installation of the substation.
So they made that request. We checked with engineering, we checked with DTMUA, sent notices to residents. That was one resident way down the end, and there was no objection filed by any agency. So that's why it's on there for vacating.
Okay, just so I understand, you said they bought everything on both sides of the street, but there is one resident at the end?
It's a dead end section, and right over that dead end, he has that little corner. Since he abuts on that corner where the street ends, we noticed that. But everyone else, PSE&G owns. And the reason you do that is when you vacate a street, half the street goes one way, half the street goes the other. But PSE&G owns both sides.
Okay, understood. And this is for them to expand the substation?
That's what they're doing.
All right, thank you for the explanation. I was also interested in resolution 181. Got somewhat of the gist of it, but I'm not sure I completely understand. It seems like we're borrowing a little over $1 million, and for what purpose?
If you,
Yeah,
I think
so
you can
this
just-
project is actually complete. It's a redwood culvert replacement. And so what this resolution does is allow us to draw down money from the state. And I forget what the interest rate is, but it's very, very low. A portion of it, I think, isn't it 0?
50%.
Am I correct? I think it is, was it 50% or 75? 0. Is the whole thing 0?
Yep. And then the other part, market rate.
Right. So that was an application that had been a long time coming because there were concerns out there, there were issues. We've talked about this project before because it really started back in 2014.
Okay.
Remember, the comment that was made from the public was, did you borrow this money in 2014? And the answer was no.
Okay, so we put this money outright, and now we're getting reimbursed in the form of a low-interest loan,
That is correct.
and we plan to use that for other infrastructure projects?
No, this is all has to go to this project.
Okay. All right, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, agenda items?
I have a problem, but I'm not sure it's on your agenda or not.
If you want, we have the second public portion shortly.
Okay,
How about at that point? Thank you.
and you are,
Tracy, Travis. Okay, we'll close the first public portion. First reading, ordinance 0-20-10, ordinance vacating Maple Avenue in the township of Gloucester, county of Camden, state of New Jersey, and that's what we just spoke about, the PSC&G property that they will be using. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
second,
Roll call.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Mrs. Winter?
Yes.
Mr. Minio?
Yes.
Mrs. Sardo?
Yes. On ordinance 0-20-08, this is the second reading, so we have a public hearing on that. It's ordinance of the Township of Gloucester, County of Camden, and State of New Jersey, adopting the Lakeland Area Development Plan Phase 3 of the Lakeland redevelopment area for the entirety of Block 12302, Lot 1.06. Are there any questions on that? Seeing none, I close that public portion. Ken, do you have anything to add or Dave on that ordinance?
I do not.
I'll just add that the planning board heard it and approved it at a special meeting on August 5th, 2020.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call?
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard? Yes. Mr. Minio?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato?
Yes. Resolution of consent agenda. Are there any council people wishing that have any questions? Do I have a motion?
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard? Yes. Mr. Minio?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato?
Yes.
Resolution 20-08181, resolution of the Township of Gloucester in the County of Camden, New Jersey, determining the form and other details of its note relating to the construction financing loan program of the State of New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, to be issued in the principal amount of up to $1,092,733, and providing for the issuance and sale of such note to the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, and authorizing the execution and delivery of such note by the Township of Gloucester in favor of the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, all pursuant to the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank Construction Financing Loan Program.
This is what we just talked about with the question. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. Minio?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato?
Yes. We have two GTE Gov questions. One is from Melissa Gaserick in Blackwood. Has there been any new information about PSEG building a substation on Oak Avenue in the Hilltop area? I live directly across the street from the property and the two houses across the street that they are going to buy and demolish. Is there anything I can do to stop this? This needs to go to the planning board and possibly the zoning board. I do know that Melissa has been in contact since this email came out on August 10th. She has been in contact with PSE&G and Addie, so I would continue to encourage those conversations through PSE&G. The other GTE Gov question was from Sam Sweet of Ariel. Sam writes, I am still not clear of the funding of the two recently repaired, refurbished playgrounds. $130,000 was originally borrowed through the capital budget of 2019 and slated for a playground in the Woodshire. A petition was signed by residents against this playground. The playground was nixed by the administration. The money was then moved to the playground at Ariel, Clementona. It was then deemed that the parks at Laurel Hills and Wood Edge were in dire need, so the money was moved there. I believe Mr. Pardis has stated that we were getting grants to help offset the cost, but then on another occasion, he said the money was coming from open space at a really low interest rate. Can we please clarify this? One, how much was spent on these playgrounds? Two, how much was actually borrowed? More than the initial $130,000. And three, did we receive any grants towards these playgrounds? Mr. Cardiff?
Yes, so, this request came in at 4:21 PM today. I was able to, ascertain answers for, all his questions. How much was spent on these playgrounds? Total was $250,735. The breakdown on that is Laurel Hills was $120,876. Woods Edge was $129,859. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question talks about the $130,000 that was budgeted in the 2019 capital, and that was specified for Woodshire. As Mr. Sweet indicated, Woodshire, there was a petition, they didn't want that playground there, and prior to moving forward, we discovered that Green Acres allows for applications for, they changed their policies and they allow for applications for playground structures. So through the work of Triad Associates, we filed applications for both Woodshire and for Ariel, by the Ariel Little League field. So we were successful in getting grant money for both of those. So with regard to the capital and the 130,000, I believe council's already discussed previously using that money for the aerial, because we diverted the aerial to Woods Edge, and we diverted the Woodshire to Laurel Hills. So that money's still there, and again, I think we're looking at doing the aerial playground with that money. Did we receive state any grants towards these playgrounds? We did. We received $276,983 from Green Acres, and that's on a reimbursement basis. $258,984.02 is for the structures. $17,998.98 is for engineering. So that 276,983 breaks down to a 75% grant of $207,737, and a 25% of it, $69,246, is a 20-year 2% loan. In addition to that, we also did receive approvals from Camden County Open Space for $25,000 for Laurel Hills and $25,000 for Woods Edge. So that they're all being completed with grant money and low interest loans, and not capital. So hopefully that answers Mr. Sweet's questions.
Thank you. We will now have the second or public portion. This is for anyone wishing to speak about any item and addressing council. You may speak one at a time. Again, please state your name and your address. Bam, now you're good.
Hi, I'm Shirley Bodine. I've lived in Ariel for over 40 years. For the past few years, I've been getting property tax relief because the township has been overcharging me on my property taxes. Well, this past year, of all times to do this, I never got my property taxes relief. $2,030 is owed to me in overpaid property taxes. I called the township because they confirmed that in the initial paperwork that I sent in that this is owed to me. I called them to find out they don't have anything to do with it. I have to call the state. Call the state because you can't get through because it's really bad timing here. I called Senator Madden's office and I get the runaround there is they forgot to put it in the budget. What? How could? Oh, we might. Hopefully, we'll put it in November's budget. But that's for next year. So what am I supposed to do with my money that I need? What's that commercial say? It's my money and I want it now? I'm at a hardship, but get in line. I realize this. I have to get in line. But this is, I'm on disability, Social Security disability. I pay school taxes. My son's been out of school in over 40 years. He's 59 years old in October. I pay school taxes for the 2 different schools. I pay for open land. Does that mean I own ownership in the land somewhere, and if it's sold, I get part of it? No. What am I paying taxes on that? Anyway, this is really a huge hardship on me, and I can't get any answers. Now, if it goes into the budget meeting for November, that's for next year. Like I said, I think I'm repeating myself now, but I'm really upset and nervous about this whole ordeal.
It's quite a travesty what the state's done. I mean, they've eliminated the property tax freeze, which takes anybody who's received the freeze over a period of time back to day one when they received that freeze. So I can agree with her. Her saying it's $2,000 sounds accurate.
Right.
They also also held up the homestead rebates. So I think it's unconscionable what they did with the property tax freeze. It's ridiculous. That's all, that's the
It's
state.
my money. It's just,
I agree with you. It's- The way it works is they pay the property taxes, then they get reimbursed from the state from the point of the freeze. And they came along and just said they're not gonna do it.
then to add insult to injury here, they raised my taxes. I had a higher tax bill. And it's just not fair. It really isn't. If they're not gonna offer it, don't do it to begin with instead of putting all this paperwork. They've had this paperwork since the beginning of March. So they had it well, early enough time so that I would get it by July 15th. I've been doing this for maybe 4 or 5 years now.
Right.
And I would get it by July 15th. Well, that came and went, you know, and then the property taxes are due August 1st, and I can only pay part of the taxes. Then I get the notice today that, you know, there's interest now because you know, the difference between the August 1st taxes. It's just a losing battle for me.
Right. One thing on top of the other. There's nothing at this point that can be done until the state decides.
It's completely 100% with the state. The municipality does not have any jurisdiction to do anything.
Citizens across the state in this situation.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's horrible. I hope they change their mind on this because it's ridiculous.
And there's no class actions or anything of that nature that can be put into effect here
I don't
to
know.
get somebody awake to find out what's going on
I
here.
would think, Tracy, we could get somebody from Madden's office to respond to her.
That's who I called. I
Yeah.
called to Jean Acker. I've spoken to her many times before on other different issues. But this is the most critical one here. And then somebody called me, oh, well, they forgot to put it in the budget. What? Come on, maybe we're hoping it'll go in this October or November's budget.
It's rather cool.
Ms. Bodine, can you give the clerk your, number, please, and name again? I'm sorry, what name?
Name, phone number, email.
Name, phone number, email.
I don't have an email.
That's fine.
That's fine.
I can send smoke signals or the extent of my phone here, but that's it for me. I don't have a computer.
That's fine. If you can give her that information, we'll try to see to follow up and see what is happening moving forward. Thank you. Anyone else? Ready?
Good evening, Council. Ray Polidoro, again from the Historic Village of Ariel. I had a topic I wanted to speak on, but was preempted by listening to this lady's story. And Tom, I know you're compassionate about what the state has done in not giving this lady the difference of her property tax freeze. But let's not forget why that number is so steep. It's because the taxes were raised here in Gloucester Township. The more you raise the taxes, the greater the discrepancy from where her property taxes rose. So the township has some responsibility to bear there too. 2014, 16, 18, and 20, as you guys increased taxes, that made that deficit and that refund for this poor lady to grow.
We control 28% of that bill.
Of course you do, and it's a number that you always use, but your numbers have been in and around 10% in 2014, 16, 18, and 20, and that number gets bigger. And when this room was packed with people discussing the budget and the tax increases, this is something that we brought up. That the property tax freeze is a misleading phrase. You're still raising your taxes, and they have to wait for the state to refund their money, often months at a time. Now could go even further as a result of COVID. And that's, we keep on going back to the state. We seek advice and guidance from the state. It's New Jersey. It's not like we're a reputable state where we do things well. We're the laughing stock of 50 states, and following their guidance is not a recommended thing. Gloucester Township can do its own thing within the parameters of the law. We don't have to raise taxes where we do. Which brings me to the point of what you guys were discussing on 181. with the Redwood Street culvert, the patch had something out on that about 2014. Was there money borrowed that was supposed to cover that whole project at that time?
No.
Okay. Because it gets a little confusing when you're moving money around. And I try to follow aerial and this one and that and the playgrounds. And we kind of just, township does it. And we've talked about this before. You borrow money and then you get a grant, which means you got the money and now you're getting the money back, whether it's FEMA, whether it's the county, whether it's the state. Is there anything that prohibits you from taking that grant money and paying these loans down? Notes, I know you can. Bonds, you can. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, you are. You basically, when you borrow money and now you're getting that money back in grants, you're getting it from all these different sources.
This project, this Redwood culvert is an NJDIT project. The money was applied for and approved by the state of New Jersey for this specific project. It cannot be used for anything.
But I'm also referring to the playgrounds. You know, when you build a playground, and I can keep going back to the Brittany Woods playground. It's the perfect example. Money that was allotted for it, you got money back for it. What was listed, you were going to spend on it, you did not spend, and you still wound up getting about $32,000 back for that. But is there anything prohibiting you?
How about the fact that we got $276,000 from Green Acres for these two projects?
Every time you get money, but you're borrowing first, it always seems like you're putting the cart before the horse.
Sometimes you have to do that first. And
I can't.
You don't know you're going to get the grant. You don't know that.
Then you borrow, but don't apply for a grant. Don't borrow money without the knowledge of not applying for the grant. We're borrowing. And then at the last meeting, and I have to apologize because it really upset me. What do you mean by old money? What is old money?
When you say old money, what are you talking
We were going to pay for a building that we're trying to procure with old money. What's old money?
It's money that's left over from projects that either came in under budget or we didn't do the project.
All right. And do we ever consider maybe offsetting the tax
We did.
burden?
You see many times we've canceled it a year in and it lapses into fund balance.
Well, it seems that when you're finding old money, last year you found $1 million in old money and you were able to balance the budget, finding old money. It just seems, it seems upsetting that we find money when we need it, we don't. Because I'm a little confused this year. On the even number of years, you tend to raise taxes. On the odd number of years, you borrow more. But I'm a little confused because this year you raise taxes and you're borrowing more. You're setting off the pace to which you've been keeping. I mean, it's been a good frequency. It's easy to predict. It's easy to prepare for. But this year you raised our taxes and you're borrowing more money. At some point, it's got to stop. And I've used up my time. Thank you. Everybody stay safe.
Anyone else? Paul?
Good evening again, Council. Paul Crew, Blackwood. I do want to echo what Ray's talking about in a little bit of a different way. You've heard this out of me before. We have to practice financial conservatism. From a state perspective, from a county perspective, from a township perspective, it's incredibly important because not just this woman's story, but many more stories like this find people in traumatic situations. And Tom, just to follow up so I understand, Triad Associates is a contractor whose purpose is to help us ascertain these grants.
That, and they also function as economic development consultants. Yeah.
Okay. So in my mind, we would task them with applying for a grant. And at least as I would approach it, we would wait for that grant to come through and then pay for a project. Are we borrowing the money? And I understand we're at rock bottom rates right now. And I can understand why you would take out a line of credit or note when you're at 0.72%. Are we doing it because rates are so low and we got to get are these projects critical to get done?
The projects are to be done. And I've said it before, there was 130,000, there was a 19, it was borrowed, that was set aside for woodshop. It happened at the 11th hour. In fact, I think we had a special meeting. Did we have a special meeting on a Saturday or a Friday to come in to approve the application of the Green Acres grants for these two playground structures? The one at Woodshire and the one at Eric. Ultimately, we had permission from them to move it to existing structures that were dangerous, deemed dangerous by the township, and we replaced them right away. So with that money, and it's approved, we're allowed to do that. Woodshire's gone, they don't want it. Ariel, since we do have that money in there, the plan is to put the playground in Ariel to get that going. That's a new playground, hasn't been constructed, so there's a lot more involved with that than going in and replacing an existing structure.
Okay. So I think you made mention that it was potentially dangerous to the public.
The playgrounds that we replaced, yes.
Taking on debt at the time, hopefully at a low interest rate, made sense because that was a critical situation. And in our back pocket, we thought we were going to get grant money. Is that a correct line of thinking?
We didn't know until we made that application. That application was made well after the finalization of the 2019 capital program and the funding, because that was the year that we funded all the outstanding notes and put them all together into a bond.
Okay. So I'm still trying to understand why we don't do the application process, simply wait on the money and then utilize it.
The application process was not available prior to that for playground structure.
Ah, okay, so it's retroactive.
Green Acres was only approving acquisition of land. All of a sudden, they made a change, and Triad alerted us to that, and so we made sure that we got an application in for both of those projects, and we were successful.
Okay, I got it.
75% is grant, 25% is 2% loan over 20 years.
I appreciate the explanation. I also wanted to extend a thank you for your explanation to Sam Sweet's question. Sometimes the eGov access questions, I think, don't get the explanations that they deserve, so I appreciate that.
It came in late, but we did get all the numbers.
Yeah, no, it was nice of you to do so. Also wanted to extend a thank you to Councilman Hutchison, who took time out of his Sunday to meet with me yesterday and take a tour of downtown Blackwood and review the Blackwood West redevelopment plan with me. I'd extend that same offer to each of you as well. One thing we found out on that tour was that a young female small business owner was unfortunately dissuaded from opening her business, which would have been Revolution Barber Shop, in an area that critically needs it. The explanation I heard and Mr. Hutchison heard was that the zoning board had made it quite difficult on her ability to open. And as we viewed, we saw that she had put up new drywall, new flooring, new roofing. She had the chairs and mirrors in there at one point ready to open up the business. Downtown Blackwood, I'm sure you've heard the old adage, beggars can't be choosers. We're desperate for businesses down in the downtown area. And if this is true, which I'd like to hear, I know there's always two sides to a story. I mean, this is disheartening to me, at least. I'm hoping maybe I can get the.
I don't know if we'll be able to get the answer tonight, but I was with Paul when we heard that. And, I know that the mayor is very much interested in assisting the businesses to come into town.
Yeah, I'm actually very much aware of that situation.
Okay.
I was not aware though that she has now decided not to open.
We heard that second.
Okay, yeah, it's somebody I know, so this is new to me. I can follow up with, and with her directly.
I would appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sam?
Good evening, Council. Sam Sweet from Ariel.
Tom, thank you for getting me those numbers. Sorry for getting it to you so late. I got tied up and meant to get it to you earlier, the questions. I just wanted, you were reading them off fast. I just wanted to make sure I got it. 75% grant,
75% grant, which is $207,730.
okay, and that's the 258, correct, for the structure, and 17,998 for engineering.
Correct.
Okay.
Which adds up to 276.
Do we pay back the grant? No,
The grant is a grant.
the grant's a
We pay
grant.
back the loan
We pay back the 25%.
over 20 years, 2%.
Okay, and that was what's borrowed, plus the 130 that we originally borrowed in 2019, that we
We
bonded.
didn't touch that 130. That 130 is still there.
That 130 is still there?
Yes.
Okay.
The plan is to use that for aerial mail.
Okay, so there's 3 playgrounds going up then, eventually.
The two are pretty much completed at this point.
Okay, all right, so the 130 is still,
Laurel Hill and Woods End.
and those are already been put in, and that's where we got the grants from that. And
Right, Woodshire's going away because you don't want it.
okay, yeah, their petition, I had some questions on the petition.
Well, you can look at the CCs that were sent to, I think, Dan Hutchison on that from the resident out there. And it's my understanding that those copies, which are 20 or 21 CCs on that email, that is all the residents.
I didn't get that when I asked for the petition, so.
I did get that.
No, I got the petition. Here, I have a copy of it with misspelled, street names and everything, no signatures or anything like that.
So there was a thank you letter sent, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hutchison, to Mr. Hutchison. And on that was copied all the neighbors that are in that area.
Okay, I didn't get that when I asked for the petition, and in this petition, it asks for a letter, or it says, took the letter and gave it to somebody, and I asked for a copy of that letter, and it was told that no letter exists.
I don't know about that, but I know that there were people out there that were extremely upset about.
I just was, like I said, the petition looked like, somebody put it on a Word document, no signatures, no names, just house numbers,
Well,
so.
if we can get that letter, the thank you letter that Mr. Hudson received, you're welcome to contact all those residents that were CC'd on
Dan,
that.
can you forward that to me?
I'll look, Sam. Shoot me a text and I'll see if I can locate that.
Okay, thank you. The other question is Wednesday zoning board meeting. There's 2 big items going on, Marksman Landscaping and the Wawa, or Provco. And I know that a bunch of residents are, concerned about wanting to speak. The attorney, Anthony DaCosta, has said that he feels that anybody who wants to speak should be able to speak, but we're only allowed 37 people in here. So with Marksman coming in to speak, and their attorneys, and then Provco, that's going to take up almost a third. You're going to have a lot of people that aren't, might not be able to speak. And he said that in order to speak, you have to be here for the whole meeting. He had made the suggestion of possibly a Zoom call, or maybe having the mayor's office move the meeting to a larger facility. And I know I've contacted the mayor's office. I've had a bunch of other people reach out to me and say they've contacted the mayor's office and not heard back. So I'm coming to you guys and saying what's going on with that, because you're going to have potentially more than 37 people that want to speak on 2 big areas.
I'm not familiar, I mean, I know what you spoke about last time, but I'm not, what you're telling me transpired between then and now, I'm not aware of. All I can do is get in touch with the mayor's office tomorrow and ask, what their outcome was and the decision and why, and let you know.
If you could, because I contacted the mayor on Thursday. I've had several residents reach out to me and say they've tried contacting the mayor's office. I know a bunch of people called the construction office to get the plans for the Wawa, and the mayor's office has been technically incommunicado. We only talk to the aides. And the meeting's on Wednesday.
Okay,
So you'll get back to me.
yep, I'll call them tomorrow and see if, make sure they've gotten the information, and either they get back to you or I will.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Amber McWigan, Blackwood. I just wanted to follow up on something from the last meeting. Among other things, Mr. Hutchison and I had an exchange about broken windows policing, and I had expressed some of my concerns about the fact that Gloucester Township accepts a grant for broken windows policing based on research that I'm aware of that shows that broken windows policing has disproportionate impact on communities of color. So Mr. Hutchison had asked me if I brought any data to support my comments. I hadn't at the meeting. I sent an email to Mr. Hutchison, Mr. Mercado, and Chief Harkins with some articles and resources. I had asked Chief Harkins if maybe he could share what broken windows policing looks like in Gloucester Township, because one of the things that's clear from the research is that the original intent of broken windows policing was to just be more involved and on the ground in communities that experience neglect, but that the way that it's been enforced in some places, especially New York City, just resulted in a lot of losses, resulting in arrests and citations, which led to cycles of poverty and unnecessary involvement in the criminal justice system. So I'm wondering, Chief Harkins, if you could maybe just share some comments on what broken windows policing looks like.
I did receive your email. I am aware of some of those, and I was still researching, so I wasn't really prepared to type. But I can tell you that the grant that we accept, that we reference broken windows policing, it's a very limited number of officers that grant funds that goes out and targets intelligence-based policing initiatives that we have. If we get information about a drug house or criminal activity occurring in a certain area, these officers are not, they're not running radio calls. They're not answering 911 calls unless we're really busy or there's an emergency. But they have, they're more proactive to try, take information, verify whether there's an issue there, and move forward. We do not do the New York style of policing that I'm very familiar with, where it's just write citations for, throwing gum on the sidewalk and things like that. When that concept came about, I mean, we've come so much further between our implicit bias training, the trainings that we've accomplished through our juvenile resource programs and whatnot. So I appreciate you bringing up. It's something that my staff and I are looking into. I honestly have to say we don't do the strict broken windows theory policing. We have our own hybrid of policing. We don't have our own intelligence, community-based policing. So in the future, as we move forward, whether that probably wasn't the right terminology in the strictest sense of the studies that you sent us. I can assure you, to put to good use, these officers will go after, they're a go-between between an undercover unit they're a problem-solving unit. They're a problem-solving where it takes time sometimes to verify whether there's an issue or a problem that's occurring in the neighborhood, or there's a particular person involves issues that recurring complaints about things. There's a whole analysis. We have what we call our crime operations analysis assessment that we do every week, and these officers are kind of targeted to go take care of those problems that take more time than a regular patrol officer has. So I can still get you. I appreciate you sending me those, those information. I was aware of some of them, and it makes us look to try to improve and do better. Whether that the strictest terms of community broken windows is probably not accurate as to what we use that grant.
Yeah, I didn't know. It's from the state of New Jersey, and I was kind of shocked that the state of New Jersey was even giving grants for broken windows.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and quite frankly, that grant has been in effect for many, many years. When I applied to the grant, it was for the previous, it had started. It probably just, we need to update to what we're doing as the times change and things change and we improve. That grant language probably has to be cleaned up a little bit, quite honestly.
Yeah, and I think I would also appreciate just, like as a citizen, as a taxpayer, just kind of knowing how, I mean, I know that you have your youth diversion programs, but in terms of how do you deal with like low-level offenses that maybe, people end up getting fined, but they're living in poverty and they can't afford to pay the fines. And so we're not just like trapping people in poverty that increases more crime.
No, I can, I can go on a long time with it. What I would highly recommend, what gives a great overview, and COVID kind of screwed it up, we were halfway through. This is what our Citizens Police Academy is geared to teach people if you have the time, on top of other things. You will get a full exposure as to what those problems is. It's hard to just put into words and all, see it in action. It gives a great overview of it. So I encourage that. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to start that up for the next class next year. But I certainly will, can give even more information about how we do restorative justice and how we're big advocates of breaking the school to prison pipeline, and even this grant that we're hoping to finalize and get going. So we're not.
Are you gonna have like a Zoom meeting or something to get community input on that grant, or is it already decided what's happening with it?
No, it's through the state of New Jersey, through we're hopeful to get, we're already getting the grant. This was started over a year ago. So those conversations about what we're going to proceed with have already occurred.
Oh, okay. I thought you had mentioned at one of the meetings that you were still taking.
No, we're always taking input, but that grant in particular is already, we had to go through the whole process and we got awarded.
Okay. Maybe some of those things are things that could be highlighted, like I've been following your Facebook page, and so maybe, just educating the community more about those things or some things that could be highlighted
I
there.
appreciate the input. Yep, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you, Council.
Can I give you something?
Sure.
After our meeting, I started looking at things. And I think it was a day or two afterwards, I took a picture of a portion of the article, so it could be out of context. But it says, one of the lessons of the decline in crime that began in the 1990s was broken windows policing. The notion that if you policed minor offenses against social order, it sent a signal to criminals that larger offenses would not be tolerated. It worked, crime rates plummeted. Now in cities like Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis, New York, and Baltimore, the approach is to tolerate even serious offenses against people and property. It should be no surprise that crime has gotten worse and that businesses which depend on order and safety are suffering. So I read that article, and then I've read other articles about businessmen and women in different parts of the country. I think one of them in Seattle, where they're pulling out of the town or pulling out of the city because they can't operate businesses. So I guess my question to you is, how do you strike a balance?
When and where was that article?
This particular article, I'm going to show you afterwards because I'm not really good at this stuff, but I did take a picture. I don't know if it was, and I do know, I got my initials out and read your stuff. It's all biased. But I'll show it to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I took a lot of care to make sure that I chose articles that were reputable, that were from reputable sources, and that were based on, sound methodology for research, which I think is really important, instead of kind of just saying, well, it seems that we've been more serious about crime, and it seems that crime has gone down, which is an unfortunate way that we do things a lot of times. So I guess I would respond to that just by saying that the articles that I found showed that there wasn't a strong correlation, actually, between reductions in crime, either reductions in minor crimes and especially reductions in serious crime. And that, in fact, Jane Stewart, president of Newark's Fraternal Order of Police, the largest police union, told Frontline that the frequent stops and citations made people mistrust the police and much less likely to cooperate when officers were investigating serious crimes. So that was just one line that I pulled out of a Frontline article. But the other issue is who's benefiting and who's hurting, right? So I think a lot of times, especially now when we hear calls to law and order, those are calls to the protection of certain kinds of people at the expense of other kinds of people. And that we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to be careful.
If somebody's operating those vehicles and the registration is expired, should that vehicle be pulled over? Regardless of who's in the vehicle, should it be pulled over?
So this is a complicated question. I mean, I'm not an expert, so I'm not gonna sit here and claim,
But it's a
but,
minor
but,
offense.
but from my perspective, I mean, think about it, right? Think of what you are introducing in that interaction, right? So because, and now maybe this would be different if it wasn't police officers pulling people over, or if it was police officers who don't have guns, right? But Ms. Stubbs shared in our last meeting that she was pulled over for a suspicion of registration not being up to date, which was not true, and that the result was that she had a gun pointed at her while she was next to her daughter, and her daughter was screaming in fear that her mother was going to be shot.
My son was pulled over the other day because of registration. He should have been pulled over. I have no problem with that. And you know what happened after that? We fixed the problem. So my question to you is this. If we're not going to enforce a law, why have that law?
There are other ways to deal with it. If you were to say to me that maybe the solution is that police officers who pull people over are not armed, maybe, or that something else happens. But what I'm asking you to consider is that you don't have to worry about your son being pulled over for a registration. Your son is unlikely to have a gun pointed at him the way Ms. Stubbs was.
Okay, can we not go to the gun yet? Can we stick to the first question, which was, if you have a bad registration, should the vehicle be pulled over? I didn't ask for that.
Right. What I'm trying to get you to see is that there are unintended consequences to these things. So everybody thought broken windows policing was a great idea. Like everybody just assumed, like you're saying, and then there were unintended consequences. And so what I'm trying to bring up is that there are unintended consequences.
You know, I want to have dialogue. I've asked a very basic question. If there is a minor infraction, like registration, okay, or let's say a vehicle comes back as owned by somebody, and I don't know the answer to this, okay, let's say the person who owns the vehicle is not licensed or has a suspended license. I think that we have, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, we have devices in the police vehicles that can read a license plate and answer those questions. So are you asking our police department not to pull that vehicle over?
I don't think it needs to be the police department's job. The registration people should know if your registration is expired.
So the DMV should come in.
They don't exist though. There's no one out there checking that stuff. That is one of our, Title 39 enforcement of the law is one of the primary duties of all municipal, state, county, law enforcement agencies.
So I look at that and I
Yes.
say that's broken windows. That's my interpretation.
Mhm.
That's a small portion of what the overall scheme is. And I think it's important because my son was shaken up. No, he didn't have it, but he was shaken up. And he understood now there are consequences to not following the law. I
And is that a
appreciate
good use of police resources?
Sorry?
Is that a good use of police
I think it's
resources?
excellent use of police
But the
resources.
single impact on your son to be a little shaken up, is there like not anything better that that police officer could have been doing with his time?
I think it's an excellent utilization of the police officer's time and resources.
I would disagree.
Okay, and that's what it's all about.
But what I'm asking you to see is that it's not really just about your feelings and about your personal experience. That I think that what I've been trying to ask is that in policymaking and program development, that we move beyond our feelings and our own personal experiences to, one, be able to see other people's personal experiences. I mean, Chief is interacting with people day in and day out. And beyond that, to be willing to look at research, to be willing to look at evidence, to hold up, does what I'm saying match up with reality?
I don't want the local police department determining which laws they want to enforce.
But they have to.
Maybe I'm wrong.
But they have to. Every time they're on duty, they make judgment calls. Because it's not just going, they can't pull over every single person who has a lapsed registration. So there's going to be judgment calls. And what the broken windows policing research shows is that when judgment calls have to be made, it's usually communities of color are disproportionately impacted. They're disproportionately chosen at random to have these things enforced. And the police department doesn't want to be in a position of, that being the status quo of the way things are, right? So then we go back to the program and say, okay, what about this actual policy has gone wrong that we can change?
In the interest, I'm sorry.
Right.
To interrupt, but in
Yeah.
the interest of time, I just want to give others a chance to speak.
Yeah, and I only wanted to hear Chief Harkins talk about
That's a great topic.
Yeah.
what broken windows looks like here. So, but yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
The 30-minute time is up.
Sam is the last question. Go ahead.
Sorry, Sam. Doesn't have your time. That's the kind of dialogue I like.
Sam, Street from Ariel. Dan, if you could speak up, I know, not speak up, but me speak in the mic. There were times where you were like lean back, we couldn't hear sometimes. So I know, but thank you for the dialogue. I heard that we took a $10 million TAM. Is that correct?
We did.
All right. Was that in August? Was that
It was in July.
July? Is that because of people not paying their taxes because of COVID, or?
It was about concerns with the uncertainty of what's going to happen.
With the August payments?
With regard to the August payments and with regard to the state aid. Now, they did make the first state aid payment. That's not to say they're gonna make the payment in September and in October. So we had concerns. We needed to pay the schools for the monthly amounts that they received for June. So we made a decision that we needed to go out and borrow that money. It had to be, in order to borrow that money, you have to run some calculations, and the CFO ran those calculations. And so what we borrowed, the 10 million, was within the boundaries of what the state law is.
Okay, so what happens if the state makes the payment in September and October? Can we turn around and say, we don't need that 10 million? Here it is back?
The 10 million matures on March, it has a maturation date, so it matures on March 1st of 2021. I do not believe there's a provision to pay it back earlier than that, so the payment will be made on that date.
Okay, but if the state so can we use that money, like to gain interest if the state makes its payments?
Yeah, but interest rates are just atrocious right now.
But 10 million, I mean,
Believe it or not, right now,
0.2% of 10 million is still like 20 grand.
we can look,
Only gave us 0.1%.
yeah,
Still, it's better than nothing.
right now we're getting 0.35%, so that's good. That will offset some of that
Okay.
interest.
All right,
And we borrowed at 0.72.
thank you. Paparon Homes that on there by the Nike base. I know they've been clearing it out, but it's still not going to closing?
It's gonna go to closing, yes.
Is it scheduled yet, or?
I've deferred to Mr. Lechner, but I think that most of the issues, the most recent was the homeowners association agreement has been ironed out, correct?
They haven't completed all their requirements of the planning board. Exactly.
So we have to look at that and find out.
I mean,
I don't have, plans have not been signed, for lack of a better. I don't know what requirements, Mr. Cardis has for closing, but
so,
in other words, they have to file a map, create the lots. When you record a deed, you actually file a map.
Could you and I follow up on that?
Yeah, I made a note to
The plan-
file on that.
The plan to file the map has not been signed yet. They haven't posted their bonds or.
okay, because my concern is, I mean, closings fall through all the time.
Bear in mind though, in this particular instance, the money has been surrendered to an outside escrow.
Okay, but what happens if Paparon Homes decides, hey, no offense, Mr. Lechner, hey, we don't want to adhere to the planning board, we're out, and now they've cleared away all those lands, do we have any repercussions? Like, can they back out of this? Because closings,
I think we
happen all the time.
10%, which would be the 100,000, but I don't foresee them backing out. Everything time we've had a meeting, they seem to intend to make this thing happen.
And they've done all that clearing themselves.
As far as I know.
Yeah, as far as I
It's
know.
on them. Township.
It's on them. The township hasn't spent a dime clearing them out, doing anything. Okay, all right. And then the last thing is, I know the township's very well invested with Main Stage, and I don't know if you guys, the council knows what's going on with Main Stage. The Arts in Blackwood, they're very hurting because obviously because of COVID, they can't put on the shows, they can't have the classes and everything, so they're trying to run a fundraiser. I don't know if you guys were aware of that, but they're petitioning people to donate to try and get through till COVID ends, because they're doing whatever they can for, kids Zoom calls and stuff like that, but they can't do any teaching, they can't do any plays or anything like that. And I know the township is really into it. I think the mayor's on the board. So I don't know if council wants to put out there, or maybe on GT Works, tell the mayor to, have people help out or something. So that's it. Thank you.
We'll now close the second public portion, polling of directors.
Mr. Barton?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Curtis?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Lechner?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Parkins?
The only thing I'd like to report to council is, we just came aware of supporting Gloucester Township Hockey Association tomorrow night in the evening, I think at 5 o'clock, the Philadelphia Flyers, during the playoffs, are having a part of their pep rally series, chose Gloucester Township Hockey Association to do a drive-by parade type of pep rally tomorrow, beginning, I think they're leaving at Glen Landing School. They're traveling down Shoes Landing Road, past the municipal building, around Veterans Park, and back down. It's not a long parade, but they're encouraging the Hockey Association players to, socially distance in Veterans Park outside. They're supposed to have flyers, alumni, gritty. They're supposed to be in trucks, and we'll be assisting with that. And that's tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. It's coming together very quickly with the playoffs and their schedule, so pretty neat event, though. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Chadwell?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Hutchinson?
I walked with Paul on Sunday. It was eye-opening, really was. Paul, you have a very good command of what's going on down there. I really appreciated that. I'd like to recommend, if anybody wants to go out to dinner, I think it's Shayna's Twig, Shayna's Fig. Yeah, it looks really cool.
It's delicious.
Yeah, so I would try it out. I think Thursday night, maybe 4 to 10 through Sunday, 4 to 10. I'm gonna try and get my wife to go out there this Thursday. It looks really good. Nice people. Amber, I believe it is, right? I enjoy our dialogue. I read about these articles all the time. I have not read your articles yet. I promise I will. But every day I spend about 2 hours in the morning reading. And I try to play both sides in these articles. And I'm going to pay attention to your issue, okay? To our issue, because it's all our issue, okay? Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
Thanks for coming out tonight. Chief, as always, thanks for your leadership and the men and women of the police department and all of our first responders who keep us safe day and night. I'd like to acknowledge all those families who lost a loved one due to overdose with Overdose Awareness Day coming up at the end of this month. Addiction is running my family. I lost my sister to an overdose of prescription drugs. Unfortunately, hers was a death of suicide, but it's still all in the same frame. So notice your loved ones, issues that they may be dealing with, or read up about it, and talk to them and try to get them the help that they need. It's an epidemic that is not going to go away anytime soon. So I appreciate that we always speak about it and acknowledge it. So thank you.
Mrs. Leonard?
I want to thank everyone for coming out. Questions, dialogue, all of it is appreciated. And again, I just remind everyone, please be careful, please be smart, please wear your masks and protect yourselves, because you can't rely on other people to protect you. You have to protect yourself.
Mr. Mannion?
Thank you all for coming out. Everyone continue to be safe. Thank you.
Mrs. Estrada?
Thank you all for coming out. Continue to be safe. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Meeting adjourned.
Chrissy, please. I might have to have someone do another big party yesterday on Friday. Yeah, I think she. In a couple days ago, I'm looking in today, I don't really know